There's a place in rural Ohio where time seems to stop, an old town of less than 2,000 people, where neighbors wave, kids ride their bikes at dusk, and doors are left unlocked at night. But in the summer of 1999, something began to rot beneath the surface, a stench, not of decay, but of silence, because someone was killing, quietly, repeatedly, and somehow everyone knew who was doing it, but no one said a word. It would take nearly 2 decades, 3 funerals, a missing sheriff's daughter, and a forgotten confession scrawled on the back of a church hymn book for the truth to come out. This is the story of Willow's End, a town that didn't just hide a killer, protected him. It started, as these stories often do, with someone vanishing. Her name was Megan Fuller, a 17-year-old honor student with a flawless record and a future headed straight for Northwestern University. On June 14, 1999, Megan left her part-time shift at Harold's Grocery at 9:12 p.m. Her manager, Donna Kelper, walked her to the parking lot. Megan got into her rust-red Jeep Cherokee. She never made it home. Her parents reported her missing at midnight. The next morning, local police shrugged it off. She's probably with a boyfriend, they told her frantic mother. But Megan didn't have one. She barely dated. She had a curfew she never broke. And her car? It was found 3 days later in perfect condition, parked beside the old sawmill 2 towns over. Not a single fingerprint. No blood. Just her phone on the passenger seat, still playing a cassette of the Cranberries. The town moved on. Mostly. People whispered. Megan's name echoed in the church prayer lists for a while, but then it faded until it happened again. 3 months later, Kyle Densmore, 19, disappeared on his way back from a late-night drive to pick up takeout. He was last seen filling up gas at a Shell station. His car, a vintage Thunderbird, was found abandoned behind the same sawmill. This time there was a trace, a single shoelace tied tightly in a knot on the steering wheel. Didn't belong to Kyle, and there was no sign of a struggle. Just like Megan, he was simply gone. A few families whispered the word curse. Others talked about copycats, or drugs, or runaways. But one person, Sheriff Alan Mears, started seeing something else. A pattern. Young people, smart, clean records, vanishing without any apparent motive. All roads leading to the same eerie spot, that abandoned sawmill. But Mears didn't push too hard, 'cause even back then, he had a name in the back of his head, and it scared him. His name was Caleb Brantley, a soft-spoken man in his 50s who worked maintenance at the town library and lived on the edge of town in an old, green-sided house that looked forgotten by time. He was polite, quiet, always alone, but there were stories. Kids said he talked to himself when he thought no one was listening. Teenagers dared each other to go knock on his door at night. None ever did. And there was that one time a neighbor swore she saw him digging in the woods behind his house. When she asked what he was doing, he said, "Burying memories." But there was no evidence, no criminal record, and nothing to tie him to the missing teens. Still, whenever a new person disappeared, someone would inevitably say, "You know who it probably is." And yet, no one reported him. Not once. Why? Because Caleb had a story of his own, a tragic one. And in small towns, tragedy often buys silence. In 1983, Caleb's wife and daughter were killed in a house fire while he was working a night shift. Rumor had it, he refused to leave the town after their deaths, said he couldn't, that their spirits were still wandering near. The community, out of pity or guilt, gave him space, gave him work, gave him a pass. But what they didn't give him was scrutiny. Caleb Brantley lived alone for over 25 years, never remarried, never moved. His house grew darker with time, curtains always drawn, mail piling on the porch. And then the disappearances began. Coincidence? Sheriff Mears wasn't sure, but he couldn't shake it. And then, in 2003, his own daughter, Lila Mears, went missing. That's when everything changed. Lila was 21, home from college for summer break. She was last seen leaving the town diner around 10 p.m. Security cameras caught her walking past the post office. And then, gone. Just like the others. No signs of struggle. No witnesses. But Sheriff Mears didn't wait this time. He ordered a full search of the town, door-to-door interviews, dogs, helicopters. And for the first time ever, he knocked on Caleb Brantley's door. Caleb answered with a smile. His shirt was inside out. He said he'd been asleep. He invited the sheriff in for tea. Mears declined, but he noted the smell. Bleach. A lot of it. Still, with no warrant, no body, and no evidence, he couldn't act. 2 days later, Mears was removed from the case. Conflict of interest, they said. Brief clouding judgment. He took early retirement 6 months later, and from that moment on, Caleb Brantley was untouchable. Years passed. Willow's End moved on, outwardly at least. The local newspaper quietly stopped printing stories about the missing. Parents stopped letting their kids ride bikes past dark. But life, as it always does, crept forward. A new sheriff took over, a man named Clay Duncan, who had grown up 2 towns over and didn't share the town's deep loyalty, or its silence. Duncan reopened the cold cases in 2015, a full 12 years after Lila Mears vanished. He requested all archived files, which were a mess, pages missing, notes redacted, photographs misfiled. But one thing stood out: the sawmill. Every disappearance was tied to it in some way, and when Duncan visited the site, he found something his predecessors had never noticed: a trapdoor beneath the floorboards, sealed with rusted nails and old planks. It took hours to pry it open, and when they did, the stench hit like a wave. Beneath the floor, in what appeared to be a root cellar, were 5 small burlap sacks, each labeled with a date. Inside each, bones, teeth, scraps of clothing. Duncan didn't need the coroner to tell him. He knew. The lost were buried here, and someone in town had known all along. The discovery sparked panic. News crews swarmed Willow's End. Families of the missing returned to town in heartbreak. And for the first time in over a decade, people started to talk, but only in whispers. Sheriff Duncan faced stone walls wherever he turned. Locals gave half answers. Memories got fuzzy. No one remembered what Caleb Brantley was doing on the nights of the disappearances. No one wanted to go on record. Even after all these years, the town still protected him. But then came the break Duncan didn't expect. An old church secretary named Elsie Grafton showed up at his office. In her hands, she held a weather-worn hymn book. It had belonged to her sister, who died 3 years earlier. Tucked inside was a folded piece of paper, stained with time and sweat. On it was a confession, scrawled in uneven handwriting. He comes after the choir, always the choir. He says music makes them clean. I saw Megan go with him. She trusted him. We all did. The note was unsigned, but Duncan had it analyzed, matched the handwriting to Emily Brantley, Caleb's niece, who died of an overdose in 2005. She had been 14 when Megan disappeared. With the cellar evidence, the confession, and the renewed public pressure, Duncan got his warrant. On August 22, 2016, he and 3 deputies approached Caleb Brantley's home just after dawn. No lights on, door locked. But when they forced entry, Caleb was sitting calmly at his kitchen table, dressed in church clothes, sipping cold coffee. He looked up and said only this: "Took you long enough." The basement was worse than they imagined. It had been remodeled into a soundproof room, walls padded, a cross mounted above a stained mattress. Old photographs lined the shelves. Each one showed a teenager smiling at a town picnic, football game, or school event. Their names were written on the backs. Some were among the missing, others weren't. Yet, in Caleb's freezer, they found labeled bags of hair, 17 of them. That's how many he planned to cleanse, as he would later call it. Only 6 had been confirmed missing. The rest might have never known how close they came. Willow's End braced itself for the trial of the century, but it never came. Caleb Brantley was found dead in his cell 2 days after his arrest, poisoned. Investigators said it was suicide, but the evidence was shaky. No traces on his hands, no signs of distress. Just a single note in his cell, written in the same shaky script they found in the church hymn book. I took what was broken. I made it whole. The town erupted into argument. Some called it divine justice, others called it murder, but few mourned. Still, something felt unresolved. Without a trial, the full truth never emerged. Without answers, conspiracy grew. Did he act alone? Was someone helping him? Then came the biggest twist of all. Buried in a storage unit on the edge of town. 2 years after Brantley's death, a real estate company clearing out abandoned units found an unmarked VHS tape in a lockbox. It was labeled only with a date, March 12th, 2002. That was the night Lila Myers vanished. The tape showed a room, the padded basement. Lila, alive, restrained, crying, and someone else in the frame. Not Caleb, a woman. It was Donna Kelper, the grocery store manager who walked Megan Fuller to her car all those years ago. The woman who had given statements for at least 4 of the missing persons cases. She'd seemed harmless, grieving, trustworthy. The truth was, Caleb had not acted alone. The FBI was called in. A new investigation revealed what Sheriff Duncan had long feared. Caleb wasn't a lone predator. He was part of something darker. A local cult-like circle obsessed with purification, control, and cleansing the youth. Donna was their handler. Caleb, their instrument. At least 3 other town members were suspected of involvement. 2 fled. 1 died in a car crash that now looked suspicious. It was a web that had been spinning for decades. And the town, it knew, maybe not the details, but it knew enough. Parents didn't speak out because they feared being ostracized. Church leaders stayed quiet to protect the flock. Even the old Sheriff Mears later admitted he'd once warned Caleb off quietly rather than risk the town's reputation. Willow's End still stands today. The sawmill has been razed. The church closed its doors in 2018, and a plaque stands in the town square, listing the names of the 6 known victims. But the true number, no one knows. No one may ever know. Because the story of Willow's End isn't just about a serial killer. It's about what happens when a community values comfort over truth, when silence becomes complicity, and when evil doesn't need to hide in the dark, because it's protected in the light. If you were haunted by this story, imagine what's still hiding in small towns just like Willow's End. Quiet, calm, and full of secrets. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more chilling stories. This is just the beginning. And next time, it might be your town.